Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Cluster Prof with Ryan and Rory, where we create cluster bleeps. Today's topic will be, what is nature?
Hello everybody. Thank you to those who listened last time, and some people who gave some feedback and comments. We'd love to get more of those, either on the YouTube channel or to us individually. It's all good, and that is it's great because we don't know what we're doing, so any tips are fantastic.
Or questions, so that we can potentially answer problems that you might have seen in our thinking or whatnot.
Questions, anything you'd like to hear from us, or yeah, tell us where we're going wrong, and we're delighted to hear it.
Him a little bit more than me.
Yeah, you don't like hearing where you're going wrong?
Well, your ego's about the size of a basketball, mine's about the size of Mount Rushmore, so
there's more to chip away at, I guess.
yeah.
If you take a sledgehammer to a basketball, then
It'll pop.
it's a disaster. Take a sledgehammer to Mount Rushmore and it's fine.
Way to turn that around.
Thanks. So, what's nature?
Well, nature. What is nature? Well, this is a very complicated question. It seems as if everyone, if you ask them what nature is, they might be able to easily tell you, well, what it is when they see it, but do they really have a concrete idea of what it is?
Do you?
Well, this is a very difficult question because what exactly is nature, die Natur, 大自然, or whatever you want to, Mother Nature, whatever, all these different words. But how about we talk about it in a very generic, specifically a Western way to begin with, or at least describe that way of thinking. You want to add some points to that first?
Well, I think whether you talk about it as in a Western way or in an Eastern way, it's not easy to get at what it is, right? I mean, I suppose it is a question for philosophy, but not that, of course, you need to have read philosophy in order to answer this question. Anybody can think about what nature is, and if I had never come into any contact with Eastern philosophy, I'm sure I would still think of it as a very difficult question to answer, or very, that there could be more than one way to answer.
Yes, but when talking about what nature is, it is often common for us to discuss what is nature, and it's definitely been discussed over whether human nature is something separate or humans are part of it, whether we are a special thing within it or we are no different than many other things within it. But
that's true. Yeah. So you have nature versus humans, right? Nature is that thing which does not include humans, right?
Well,
that's one kind of conception of it.
yes, and a lot of people who take that, they seem to have this view that technology, if that's an appropriate word, is kind of taking over our lives, and they kind of see this supposed nature, what with forest and rivers and birds and frogs and stuff, as separate from us because of how much we've modified that which is around us.
Yeah, so I guess people listening might be thinking, what do you mean this is a generic way of thinking about nature, that it's the thing which does not include humans? Of course humans are part of nature.
I'm just talking about how much of the like for example, environmentalism. There seems to be this idea that nature is something we need to protect, as if when talking about us as a part of it could be just as effective as if we say it's something separate that we are damaging on as a outside entity.
So the idea that we are destroying nature. Okay.
Now, I don't want to stereotype, put all environmentalists in one box, as plenty of environmentalists will emphasize that if you destroy the environment, well then we're destroying our home and so forth. But perhaps I'm getting a little bit tangential. Maybe we should...
Well, it might just be a little bit, because I think we've talked about this a little bit before, so I think I know what you're getting at, but it might be difficult for other people to get a sense of what you mean here. And maybe it will be easiest to convey this conception of nature by talking about something like a smartphone or a building made of concrete and glass. Is this nature, right?
Well, okay. Is it nature?
Is it part of nature? A computer and a MacBook, is that part of nature?
Well, these are tools, and a chimp might use a small stick to put into an anthill and then get ants to grab onto it so that they can pull the ants out and eat them.
And an anthill is like a building that an ant built, right?
Yes.
Or that a load of ants built. Yeah.
And there's many more examples we could bring up of animals building houses, bird's nests, beaver dams, coral reef. Well, coral reefs are kind of an animal in and of themselves that other animals are using to live on, and we can even come up with more tools. I think otters or something use rocks to crack open shellfish, and I mean shellfish, they kind of use their shell as a protection.
And they build that shell somehow, right?
Yeah.
In some very complex way. But with human objects, like I'm looking at an electric fan here and an air conditioner unit, we often look at these things and see a very definite difference or distinction between them and, say, that tree that we can see out the window.
Well, one problem is, I mean, I don't want to get into the man is a rational animal argument, but humans are possibly at least the most complex thinking creature as far as we can tell in the world. We also have opposable thumbs. We can use our hands in ways that even if an animal, say, such as a dolphin, had our intelligence, they wouldn't be able to mold stuff due to their lack of opposable thumbs. But effectively, it seems like there's a greater complexity to what we create than what lower animals can do. But I don't see why what chimps and beavers and other animals do can't be understood as just a simpler, or rather ours is an extension, a more complex extension of what they do.
Yeah. So you mentioned two things there: opposable thumbs, which is like physiological difference, I suppose. But well, I mean, it's just one of our characteristics. But it's kind of maybe like a kind of almost a cliched explanation of like the reason why humans are different. But reason is maybe even more interesting, right? And speaking of philosophers, many, have argued that the distinction between humans and other animals lies in this reason.
Yes.
What if humans did not have reason? What if we did not follow a reason? Then we would be natural. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if that would be the case because, maybe this is also cliche, but it's supposedly our more complex brain system that allows us to conceive of such a thing as reason and allows us to even overcome this pure passion-driven way of doing things. If it's part of our brain that does this, I don't see why we have to assume our brain is separate from nature then.
Okay, so this is one kind of conception of nature where it's that thing that we have the potential to destroy by using our reason. Yes. And our technology. The thing that it was originally untainted and now is tainted by human intervention. That is nature. How else could we think of this word nature?
Well, some people would think it's everything that basically can be found within the anthropocentrine. I think that's the appropriate word. I don't know if that's the word for the part of the earth that virtually things can live in.
Anthropocentrine. Anthro is human, right?
Yeah. I think I mixed up that word. I think I used the wrong word. Basically everything within the eco. Basically, there's a certain part of the earth where ecosystems can exist.
Okay. And some part of the earth where they can't exist?
Okay, people don't usually call the center of the earth or the outer space.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we couldn't. Then that doesn't mean we couldn't conceive of them as being a part of nature. But then, do we have a limit at which nature is, at which something isn't, other than the supernatural natural division? Which I'd like to table that, and let's continue on this thing we're talking about right now.
Okay, so you mentioned two there. One is like the sum of all the ecosystems on Earth, I guess. All of natural life, right?
Yeah.
And then another one is nature, including the sun, the earth, the moon, the universe, everything that exists.
But then, what separates nature from reality then?
Then maybe then nature could be thought of in one sense as kind of equivalent to reality. But I guess it's a reality that's out there rather than a reality that's in the mind. Because if you think of, say, Kant, Immanuel Kant, or some other philosophers, they'll think of our conscious reality as primarily conceived of within the mind, or created by the mind, by the faculties of our understanding.
Yes.
So nature...
But here's something. They do tend to make a distinction. There is something out there. For Hume it's the Newman... for Kant it's the human. For Hume there's these actual objects, but then all we're seeing is sensation or representations of them. Schopenhauer has another view in which basically there are actual objects in the world, but our will and the representations our will is given are what are all that we are all that are truly being seen.
Okay, so for some of these philosophers, I'm just going to say Kant again. There may be noumena, which are like physical objects or phenomena.
Just anything we can't observe, basically.
Can or cannot observe?
Well, the noumena is supposed to be the unobservable.
The unobservable. Okay, but they may exist, but we cannot reach them.
Yes.
Right? So this is a way of thinking of existence, right?
Yeah.
That it is created by consciousness, rather than the world is here, right? And then humans are a part of it, and humans have consciousness. This is, in a sense, another way, like an objective way of thinking about existence, right?
Yeah.
And it's in this sense that nature could be conceived of as everything, including humans. And then there's another way in which we use the word nature, and that would be, for example, the nature of a chair, or the nature of a conversation, the nature of
oneself.
Yeah.
That's about the most basic way it's talked about. I mean, the most common way it's talked anyway.
Like human nature?
Yeah, or just within one, or just, why are you doing that? It's in my nature. Why is she doing that? It's in her nature.
Mm-hmm. So is this just another meaning of the word, or is it linked to the previous meanings that we talked about?
Well, in some ways it seems like there could be overlap. Because we just like how we will sometimes talk about technology or whatever as being unnatural. We'll also talk about certain behaviors as being unnatural. Homosexuality is unnatural. Going around running outside with like you're on fire when you're not is unnatural. Wanting to take the life of another human being for fun is unnatural, etc.
Yeah, people will talk in these ways. This is kind of these are kind of normative statements, I guess, right? So the natural is like the norm.
Yes.
And then to vary from the norm is the unnatural.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, and well, when we first started talking about this topic, I was interested in talking about it in terms of Taoist philosophy, because in Taoist philosophy you have this seeming contradiction where, on the one hand, I'm talking about the Tao now. The Tao is the process of everything, and it includes all change, or it is change itself. So it is the constant unfolding process. Or maybe this is not the Tao, maybe this is more accurately described in Taoist terms as Ziran, which is usually translated as nature.
Or self-so.
Or self-so is another translation of Ziran. Yeah. So nature and self-so. Self-so, self-unfolding, right? It is so due to itself. Is that how we'd understand self-so?
Possibly, but you're definitely the more knowledgeable in Taoism than I am. I mean, problem with defining what Ziran is. A lot of times when we talk about it, we talk about, say, it seems to often be talked about in terms of actions, not in terms of this great force or whatever you want to call that all of reality, like, we don't seem to think of it in a substance way. We seem to think of it as somebody's actions are just going a certain way.
Okay, so I was going to say that there's maybe a kind of a contradiction, or maybe a paradox is a better word than a contradiction. A paradox where, on the one hand, it is everything, right? Everything unfolds of this in this process, right? This process of nature. But on the other hand, you have some actions, like you're saying, which could be described as self-sowing, right?
Yeah.
Or like unfolding in this natural way. So the seeming paradox for me is how, on the one hand, is it unfolding? Is it everything? You know, the way that everything unfolds, and at the same time, you could or could not act in this way. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
how can something be part of nature but less natural than something else?
Well, this is a very complicated question. One philosophy I could potentially turn to that might give us an idea is that of the Upanishads.
Okay,
The Upanishads are basically an important group of texts that came about around the 6th century BC in India. They inspired Buddhism and Jainism and a lot of other, as well as many schools of Hinduism that exist today. And I remember at one point they talk about both the dream world and the real world being an illusion, but the dream world is less real, or rather the world we live in is still more real than the dream world. So there could be basically there's a different logic going on within the Upanishads. So maybe there's a different logic going on in Taoism when they talk about something being less natural even though it's a part of everything. But I don't know.
Well, I came across this this term recently, which is polylogos, I think.
Polylogos?
So basically some term
Logos.
which means the existence of multiple kinds of logic. And I heard it while listening to an ebook from von Mises. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right.
Ludwig von Mises?
Yeah, one economist from the Austrian school.
Yeah.
And he was arguing against this idea that there could be different logics, because for him there is just one kind of logic, that as humans we cannot conceive of another kind of logic. But I guess do you see things differently, or how do you understand an existence of another kind of logic within these? What did you say the name of the philosophy was again?
The Upanishads were
Upanishads.
like...
Because I am also confused with this, and in reference to Taoism. Okay, maybe while you're thinking of an answer to that question, if you would like to answer it, I can say a little bit more about what I mean. Like, so within Western, like kind of classical Greek philosophy, or stemming from that tradition, there are laws of reason, right? Such as the law of identity, that a thing must be identical to itself, the law of non-contradiction, which is that a thing cannot be and not be at the same time, and the law of excluded middle, which is that for every proposition, for every statement with a subject and predicate, either the positive or the negative formulation of that statement must be true. So basically everything, so long as it's a statement, it must be either true or not true. So these are three laws of reason.
Well,
and let me just finish first with what I'm saying. So if we were to say that in another way of thinking, in another mode of thinking, that these laws do not exist, well, that is not necessarily to say that there are two different kinds of logic. It might just be to say that, you know, that these laws missed out on something, right? So, you know, not that logic is different. So basically this is the anti-polylogous argument, that there cannot be different kinds of logic. If other systems of thought don't abide by these laws and are also valid, then simply these laws are problematic. Yeah, I mean, what I just said might entail a very base understanding of these laws, but okay, I interrupted you there. You were going to say.
Well, I personally have also found the idea of there being multiple logics to be very hard to rationalize. But I mean, apparently okay, you know, one of the laws you mentioned was the law of non-contradiction. Apparently, you know who Pythagoras is, don't you? Not Pythagoras, but Pythagoras.
Was he the father of triangles?
Heck yeah. Pythagoras. Well, no, Pythagoras. He's considered the first relativist. And he said something along the lines of, man is the center of... I'm not remembering the quote exactly, but he basically said that man is the center of all things, meaning basically this is interpreted as kind of a argument for everything is relative. And okay, the law, apparently Plato I think Plato uses Socrates to argue against this by bringing up the law of non-contradiction, but Pythagoras supposedly didn't accept the law of non-contradiction for I don't know what reason, but he didn't. So,
well,
I can't personally envision another logic, but
there is this conversation going on. Okay. Well, in Taoist philosophy, I guess you have the yin and yang theory, right? So if people saw the drawing of the previous video, then you'd see the Taoist symbol, or I'm sure you know this symbol anyway. It's the black and white symbol.
You probably have seen somebody with a tattoo of it.
Yeah, and there's a black dot within the white part and a white dot within a black part, and this is kind of like that there is a seed of the yin within the yang and a seed of the yang within the yin.
Although the painting doesn't perhaps do enough justice to it, a more accurate picture would probably be like a moving animation one in which there's an influx of black and white mixing together and whatnot.
but just to explain like the basic concept of yin and yang. Yin is the dark or feminine attribute of nature, dark, feminine, passive, and yang is the bright, masculine, active part of nature. So I think that, in fairness to the Taoists, right, whether or not you agree with the alignment of masculine and, say, activeness, and feminine and, passiveness, is not maybe central to accepting or denying this. For example, you might say, well, I am a male, but I am very calm and patient and passive, whereas my maybe significant other is female, or my sister is quite active and fiery and yang, right? But there is this yang within the yin and the yin within the yang. So there are yin and yang within every person. It is not a strict categorization of all things feminine within the female person, or masculine within the male person. It's more an interaction within two elements of nature, which produces a balance. So maybe if you practice yoga, like I've been practicing with Jess Hatchett recently on YouTube, and she has a yin and yang class in which she encourages you in more relaxed positions, so yin positions, to use your yang, so to maybe activate certain parts of your body, right, while in a relaxed position, and then while in a more yang position, right, in an active position, which is maybe more strenuous on the body, to try and be relaxed, so to bring out your yin. So in this sense, within one person you also have this balance, and it produces a kind of mastery of this, I suppose, produces a kind of balance, right? So you could think of, I don't know, maybe a business person, right, high profile business person with a lot of responsibility, who remains very calm under a lot of pressure, right? And there, in this sense, there is this balance, right? Or maybe, when everybody is just feeling lazy, there's this person who's bringing energy into the situation, and this is again bringing about this positive, balanced environment or situation. So that's just to say something about yin and yang, because I think these are important to the Taoist conception of balance within nature. So you cannot escape nature, you cannot escape being part of nature, but you can be more in tune with it, and in this sense maybe you can be more natural. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, I guess makes somewhat sense.
Well, let me ask you another question. How does that relate to skyscrapers and preservation of our natural ecosystems?
Well, skyscrapers require certain engineers and builders and so forth. And I mean, there's lots of examples of people working all sorts of professions in the Zhuangzi, and they seem to be very good at their job because of the attitude or whatever they have been put into. I don't see why a skyscraper engineer or one of the many construction workers on it couldn't get into their occupation the same way all the different animals.
So from birth into adulthood, how could we conceive of a natural life? How could we think of a natural life? Is it a process of constant resistance to these things in our world which we sometimes talk of as being unnatural, like the smartphones, air conditioners and skyscrapers? Or is it natural to accept these as part of reality, part of nature? And here's a question for you, talking of nature. What we want to preserve when we think of the environmental problem, is it nature or is it the current state of our ecosystems, the ones that support man and the trees and animals that we love, like? Man, of course, just being people, the people, of course, who we also love and like all around us. Of course, we want to preserve these things, but is this best described as preserving nature, or based on the few different conceptions of nature which we've talked about, is it not actually preserving nature? Because is nature just everything? Is nature, so if all these ecosystems are obliterated, will nature perish, or is nature the thing which does not perish? And just to go back to talking about, say, Kant and philosophers who might conceive of our human reality as first and foremost produced in the mind. So to use a common what's the word, ploy for describing this notion is, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? In a kind of Kantian conception of reality, maybe, no, it doesn't, right? If it is not part of that which perceives a sound, so like the conscious reality of a human, then it does not make a sound, right? There is no sound. There is no sound to be heard, and therefore there is no sound to be made. So in this sense, maybe if all humans are wiped out, if all conscious beings are wiped out, then nature will end, or reality will end. But in another sense, if we think of nature as just everything that exists, the thing which in a Kantian sense we don't have access to, they are the noumena, the things outside of our perception but which have their actual existence, then in this sense nature will presumably persist once we destroy all the ecosystems, or if we destroy all the ecosystems, hoping that we don't. Any thoughts?
Well, it does seem like we are primarily concerned with preserving ourselves, if not the ecosystems themselves. Is it natural? Don't know.
Well, I think self-preservation is natural, right?
Yeah. All animals, although then we get into Darwinian evolution if I start talking anymore.
Okay.
Like, all animal, like according to Darwinian theory, all living things they survive. Their reasons for doing things is to basically survive so that they can pass on their genes. That's why it's beneficial to develop mutations that can help your species gain an advantage, whether that be finches with beaks that are appropriate for opening up fruits, nuts, or whatever, or being able to camouflage oneself under the sea so predators don't get you or whatnot.
Self-preservation, or preservation of you and yours, me and mine, right? Me and
Yes.
my genes, me and my relatives, you and yours, you and your relatives. Is that what genes are? Are they relatives? Or are they all of humankind, I suppose, or all of a species, which could also be thought of as that we are all related? And we often say this.
Well, genes seem to go beyond just every creature within a species.
Yeah.
Because creatures within the same species, like, look at the number of animals that fight. The males fight to get the female.
Mm-hmm.
The one that wins tends to get to reproduce.
Yep.
So there must be something. Seems like the genes almost see themselves as, well, not see themselves because I assume they're not cognizant, but they act in sort of a way as if
they're individuals.
Yeah.
But at the same time, cannibalism is rare within pretty much all species.
Yeah. That's true. And many creatures seem to also be able to show empathy towards one another, like piranhas, perhaps the most vicious animal, one of the more vicious animals. We think of them as this bloodthirsty, swarming fish creature. But apparently when they're swarming, they will not attack each other.
Which is also maybe linked to self-preservation, right?
Yeah. So it could be that genes might somewhat operate in a way that there's a preservation of the species in mind, but then there might also be a preservation of the individual in certain cases as well.
So preservation of the self is an important part of human nature in a lot of conceptions of human nature, right?
Yes. Like, I mean, Marcus Aurelius, when he talks about nature, he talks about, like, when bees, they operate as a bee should. Spiders, they operate as a spider should. And then he talks about how, you shouldn't sleep in bed, you shouldn't, like, sleep in or whatever, because nature has given you this duty or whatever to live like a human, to be a human. You need to do certain things. What that is, well, Marcus Aurelius has a very complex idea of what that is, but
well, Marcus Aurelius is a Stoic, right?
Yes.
And Stoicism is sometimes compared with Taoism.
Yeah, because, well, there seems to be a somewhat of an idea of oneness within everything in Stoicism.
Well, speaking of self-preservation, say in the Tao Te Ching, a Taoist text, which relates to power, it's commonly thought of as a text which is written for the sake of the ruler. And how does the ruler stay where he or she is? Part of this is forgetting the self, or to act not for the self.
For other people.
For other people, yeah, to try and get rid of the self. And this is acting kind of with the Tao, right? Acting in a non-coercive way. And maybe acting in tune with nature. So the Taoists use the image of water, right? Water is this this thing which is without bias, right? It does not decide for itself where it flows. It just flows downwards, flows always where it's most natural. And this is this is an image for efficacious human action. You mentioned oneness, and in a sense this kind of not acting for oneself or getting rid of this self means to put you more in with the one, right, or in with the whole. As long as you are acting for yourself, or if you're selfish, then you are singling yourself out from the whole, and that weakens you rather than strengthening you. So, is this similar at all with Marcus Aurelius?
Well, let's see, Marcus Aurelius, he does like to point out that problems with like fame and wealth and like people like Socrates and Julius Caesar and so forth, they were all well revered and whatnot, and now they're gone. All that greatness within them is no more.
Well, what is nature?
Do we have an answer yet?
Is it the birds and the bees and the trees, sunshine?
Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Maybe mankind is but the only thing that is natural. Okay, you have anything to say?
Do we have a 1 minute section?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So everyone, you know it's quite a fun activity to learn how to do, as an adult, not as a child. Monkey bars. For the longest time, I thought I was never going to be able to do monkey bars. Then I decided I wanted to improve my pull-up count. So I tried teaching myself how to do monkey bars. And I thought I was never going to be able to do it, but all the way back in January, I managed to do it for the first time. Now I'm up to the point where I can climb 8 times on each side in one session. So, all I'm saying is, if you think you can't do something, you might need a little bit more patience.
Okay, so some inspirational words about monkey bars. Next time, tune in for death.
Yes, it's going to be very disturbing.